You're watching Eyewitness Newsmakers.
We are talking to the Senate Republican leader, Bob Huff, from Sacramento, down today to talk about some of the issues that have come up since the State of the State address from the governor. Another issue at the crossroads this coming year is high-speed rail. Let's hear the governor's continued support for it.
Now, just as bold is our plan to build a high-speed rail system connecting the northern and southern part of our state. This is not a new idea. As governor the last time, I signed legislation to study the concept. Now, 30 years later, within weeks of a revised business plan that will enable us to begin initial construction before the year is out. President Obama strongly supports the project and has provided the majority of funds for the first phase. It's now your decision to evaluate the plan and decide what action to take. Without hesitation, I urge your approval.
All right, so the administration has said that get this thing started this year, and it's going to start in the Central Valley because that is the easiest alignment to tackle to begin with. Your reaction and your overall thoughts about high-speed rail?
I've talked to other countries where they have high-speed rail. They generally say, in fact, they've always said, start where the people are, then move out once that's successful to the other areas. And it seems like we're doing it backwards here. So even to the degree that, people that are stuck in bumper-to-bumper track every day, they want some infrastructure investment. They just scratch their heads and say, why in the world would we start it up in the central part of California? We
have an exclusive survey by Survey USA for Eyewitness News, and we want to look at our exclusive poll. The question was, should the voter-approved sale of nearly $10 billion in bonds to finance high-speed rail be stopped? And 53% of Californians said yes, it should be, and 33% believe the project should go ahead. 14% are not sure. What I don't know, Senator, from this poll, though, is whether or not people are so opposed to it because of where it's beginning, as you've just pointed out, or whether they just don't like the idea of high-speed rail at all.
And it's something you probably wouldn't know unless you do some very extensive polling or take it back to the ballot and have them check in with the thing. It's a complicated issue. We do have to plan for the future. We aren't investing enough in infrastructure. This could very well be the backbone of our transportation system in 30 years, and you got to start sometime. But it came out at $98 billion, the recent business plan. The governor is expecting to have a newly revamped one, so we're not sure what's going to happen there, but clearly the costs have gone way past what the voters thought they were paying for.
Well, you talked about the fact that there's been some discussion that where it should start is where the people are. Do you have any ideas where that should be?
I think it should start in L.A. That's the largest concentration of people are in Southern California. I think it ought to start here and then move on out. And then people would find it relevant because you could build an Anaheim to L.A. section. It would have ridership immediately. Then L.A. up to the high desert, ridership immediately. Those kinds of things make sense.
And what more or what could be done at this point, though, to make that happen?
Well, you'd have to have Congress realign. Part of the reason it's happening up in Central California is the strings that were attached to federal money said it had to start up there, as I recall. So that you would have to start back there. That's a little bit different because Congress has changed since these earmarks were put in the transportation plan.
There's been some rumblings that there's been a lot of lobbying against it by oil interests, by the airline industry. Do you get pressured on any of those accounts?
I've never been pressured by those on that. It's more of the big picture idea that, can we afford to spend $100 billion on this when we have all these other pressing issues?
Well, let's talk about another pressing issue, Senator. The governor's realignment plan, which, of course, to decrease the state's prison population, sends some of the nonviolent prisoners back to local jurisdictions to be housed here. It's being called, some have said it's an early release of criminals, but when I've talked to those who support it, they say it's not an early release. They're coming back to jail.
Yeah, they're coming back to jail when they have room, but there's no room at the county level. So I often said the state loves to outsource our misery, and that's what we did with this realignment plan. Recently, the state had the receivership lifted that was overseeing the jails because they're overcrowded, or the prisons, I should say. But now you have an early release happening at the local level because they don't have a place to put them. So, to say that they're still being jailed is not exactly right because many of these convicted folks are getting out early.
The sheriff has said that he's got the room for them, but he has said that there is some concern about the funding to accommodate the additional population. What guarantees has the state legislature given to local sheriffs and others that there will be the funding to handle this influx of up to 35,000 additional inmates?
Long term, there has been none. There was short-term funding, but from Sacramento's perspective, we have a history of looking at the local level to solve our problems. And the local, the counties, the cities, they can all raise taxes on their own. So to the degree that they want to protect their streets, now that they have a burgeoning prison population or jail population, they can. And I'm not sure that we solve it at the state level.
As we're talking about that push and pull over taxes, let's talk a little bit about your opinion about community redevelopment agencies. Governor did away with them, said the state needs the money here for the bigger picture for other programs. And all local municipalities, LA's included, have said that leaves hanging so many redevelopment projects that could bring low-cost housing and others. There's a proposal to go ahead and just fund the rest of the low-cost housing element of this. Where do you stand on this?
I've been a long-time proponent of redevelopment. I was on a city council for 9 years. We tried to establish a project area. We're unsuccessful, but certainly it was the economic development tool the state had. We don't have programs that create jobs, that take blighted areas or underperforming areas and make them productive. And the philosophy behind it is as the values go up, you have more taxes so that the increment is temporary, but the improvement stays for a longer period of time. It's so complicated, most people didn't understand it, and so when the state set it down, now we're finding this whole ripple effect of cities finding that they were funding things they weren't even aware of through redevelopment. It'll take a while to thoughtfully fix those problems.
What you're saying there, what I'm hearing you say, is that perhaps things were used, these monies were used on projects that perhaps might not have been used on these projects or should not have been.
Well, there was a lot of reforms done in the early 90s, but most of the abuses to redevelopment that were cited happened prior to that. But that's often the case. We have long-term memory on the things that we don't like. But there's just not much to replace it. Some cities became dependent to fund public safety because you could make a nexus that they're also projecting the areas that are being developed. It was very intricately woven on how the funds from redevelopment propped up other parts of local government. Money's fungible, and so that you spend it, you can develop it one way, you spend it in another way, but it benefits the whole. With it gone, some cities are in a crushing fiscal problem.
Do you see some money getting restored somehow?
There is a will in the legislature now to try to make something work, but it's a lot more difficult to put Humpty Dumpty together after it's fallen off the wall.
All right, Senator, we have a few more questions for you, so we want to have you stay with us. We'll be back with more from State Senator Bob Huff.